In the pre-dawn stillness, 35 kilometers behind a front line that had become a scar of mud and iron, a Russian fuel train snaked through the occupied territory like a steel serpent. It was more than a train. It was the lifeblood of an army. In its 11 tanker cars sloshed 660,000 liters of diesel and aviation fuel, a mobile reservoir of power destined for tanks and attack helicopters. It moved with an arrogant confidence, cocooned within layers of electronic warfare and air defense systems that were supposed to make it an untouchable ghost. This deep in enemy territory, it should have been perfectly safe. But miles away, in a cramped, makeshift command post, shrouded in camouflage netting, 4 Ukrainian pilots from the elite Ronin unit were about to challenge that assumption. They weren't in cockpits. They were hunched over screens, their faces illuminated by the ghostly green and gray flicker of analog video feeds. These signals were fragile threads stretching across an impossible distance, transmitted by 4 FPV quadcopters, drones assembled from commercial parts, costing less than a high-end laptop, and now tasked with a mission that defied every military textbook. Standard FPVs give out at 3 kilometers. The mission commander, call sign Taras, had briefed them. You are pushing to 35. You are not just flying, you are trespassing on the laws of physics. Each drone was a link in a chain. Behind them, the intelligence analysts of Kabul 9 fed them real-time updates, their digital whispers a constant stream of enemy positions and movements. The signals intelligence experts of Alpha Unit listened to the Russian ether, intercepting their communications, waiting for the first cry of alarm. And standing by, the electronic warfare specialists of Next Group had their hands on the switches of counter-jamming systems, ready to wage a war of brute force in the electromagnetic spectrum. The mission began smoothly. The attack drones, designated Kestrel flight, passed the 15-kilometer mark, already 5 times their expected range. Their flight was only possible because of a series of repeater drones, hovering like invisible sentinels at 500 meters, catching the weak signal and flinging it forward. It was a delicate, audacious relay race.
Then, disaster struck. The screen of Kestrel 1's pilot, a young operator named Oleg, dissolved into a screaming wall of static. A single blinding flash of white, then nothing. Signal lost on primary repeater. I'm blind. Oleg's voice was tense but steady. A Russian Verba Manpads operator, patient and sharp-eyed, had spotted the primary repeater drone hanging against the pale morning sky. A streak of smoke, a silent explosion at 500 meters, and the critical link in the chain was severed. The mission, 35 kilometers of flight and weeks of planning, was now teetering on the brink of total failure, seconds from ending in 4 useless crashes in an anonymous field. The control room was silent. Every operator held their breath. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, an eternity. Oleg kept his hands on the controls, his mind racing, replaying the drone's last known trajectory, ready to fly on instinct alone. Suddenly, the static resolved into a grainy, ghost-like image, a picture so degraded it looked like a memory. The backup repeater, flying lower at just 200 meters and 2 kilometers off the optimal line, had come online. It had been harder for the Verba to detect, but the angle was poor. The signal strength indicator plummeted to 60%. But it was there. It was enough. Through the blizzard of interference, Oleg could just make out the silver glint of the railroad tracks below. The mission was back on. But their ordeal had only just begun. At the 25-kilometer mark, Kestrel 1 flew into an electronic nightmare. The video feed didn't just degrade, it was torn apart. The screen became a chaotic canvas of rolling bars, melting pixels, and flashes of pure noise. The drone had just entered the 15-kilometer engagement bubble of a Russian R-330-G JTEL jamming system. It was the electronic equivalent of flying into a hurricane.
Engaging frequency hop sequence now, Oleg commanded, his fingers dancing across a keypad. The drone began a desperate ballet across the spectrum, jumping between 40 channels per second. The Xitel was a behemoth, flooding the airwaves, but its power wasn't infinite. It couldn't scream on every frequency at once. The Ronin unit knew this. They had mapped its patterns through dozens of painful losses, learning its habits, its weaknesses. Oleg's hopping sequence wasn't random. It was a carefully choreographed dance. 3 quick hops on the common 5.8 GHz band to draw the jammer's attention, then a lightning-fast jump to an obscure, underpowered frequency for 2 precious seconds of a semi-clear signal, then back into the storm.
The counter-EW team engaged their system. It wasn't a subtle hack. It was a focused blast of electromagnetic energy, a battering ram that punched a clean tunnel through the Russian jamming. For a glorious moment, Oleg's screen cleared. The image was sharp, the train tracks below perfectly defined. But this power came at a terrible price. For those 30 seconds, their hidden position was lit up on every Russian detection system in the sector like a lighthouse in a storm. They had a 17-second safety margin. Ukrainian intelligence calculated the average Russian artillery response time at 45 seconds. At the 28-second mark, next group would cut transmission and begin a frantic relocation. It was a gamble they had validated on 3 previous missions. A gamble with their lives. With a clear signal, Oleg pushed the drone forward, covering vital ground. But a new threat appeared. The massive Krasuka 4 system, a long-range electronic warfare sentinel, had a solid lock on their control signals. On a Russian screen, an operator immediately vectored a Pantsir S-1 air defense system to intercept. "Missile lock! We have inbound!" the Alpha Unit analyst warned. The Ukrainians had anticipated this. On Oleg's command, 6 tiny, cheap decoy drones, launched moments before, activated their corner reflectors. On the Pantsir's radar, 6 powerful new contacts bloomed into existence, indistinguishable from the real attack drones. The Russian operator, faced with a sudden swarm, made the logical choice: engage them all. Missiles streaked into the sky. But these decoys were garage-built contraptions of racing drone parts and aluminum foil-wrapped energy drink cans. The cold had drained their batteries, the jamming had fried some circuits. Only 4 of the 6 activated properly. The Pantsir wasted 8 of its 12 precious missiles on garbage, leaving the real Kestrel 1 and Kestrel 2 exposed. 4 missiles left on the Pantsir. It's switching to cannons. This was the moment for which the pilots had memorized every dip and rise of the terrain. "Terrain mask, go low now!" Oleg yelled. Both drones dove, plummeting to just 10 meters off the ground, skimming the tops of the tall grass. The Pantsir's autocannons had a minimum engagement altitude of 15 meters. Below that, its radar was blinded by ground clutter. The drones were now in a deadly corridor, too low for the radar-guided cannons, but a single unseen power line or tree branch away from instant destruction. Oleg flew on pure muscle memory, pulling up 3 meters to clear the power lines at kilometer 27, banking hard left to avoid the radio tower at kilometer 29, landmarks he had only ever seen on satellite photos and in simulator runs.
4 kilometers from the target, the train's locomotive horn blasted a frantic warning. It was accelerating. A moving target's hit probability drops from 90% to 30%. Through the static, Oleg saw the plume of diesel smoke thicken. The beast was trying to flee. 2 kilometers. The final layer of defense activated. A train-mounted Pole 21 jammer erupted with localized, overwhelming power. It was designed to create a final, impenetrable bubble. Oleg's screen dissolved again, worse than before. He was flying blind, guided only by the last image in his mind and the unwavering line of the tracks. He began counting cars through the static. 7, 6, 5. The target was the 3rd car, the lead fuel tanker. A hit there would guarantee a chain reaction. At 500 meters, the Pole 21's power became absolute. The screen was gone. Oleg was flying on faith and a stopwatch. 3 seconds to impact. 2, 1. At 10:32 a.m., Kestrel 1 slammed into the 3rd tanker. The RPG-7 warhead-shaped charge punched through the steel skin, injecting a jet of molten metal into 60,000 liters of fuel. The world erupted. A silent flash on the command post screens was followed by the data telemetry flatlining. The train's emergency brakes screeched, the enormous convoy shuddering to a halt,
amidst a blossoming fireball.
But the mission was not over. 30 seconds later, Kestrel 2 dove into the massive smoke plume, using the tracks as its only guide. It struck the fourth car, ensuring the inferno would spread. 30 seconds after that, Kestrel 3 faced a solid wall of black smoke and roaring flame. Its thermal camera was useless, overwhelmed by the heat. The pilot, flying on the pre-calculated position of the seventh car, emerged from the smoke just 50 meters from his target. He had 1 second to adjust. He hit it, dead center. The final drone, Kestrel 4, had the most challenging task. The train was now a singular continuous pyre, flames clawing 100 meters into the sky. One tanker, at the very rear, remained untouched. Leaving it would be an incomplete victory. The pilot pushed his drone into the blackness, counting down from his last visual reference point. He flew through hell itself, a blind angel of vengeance. At 10:33:30 a.m., Kestrel 4 found its mark. The final explosion sealed the train's fate. All 11 tankers were consumed, 660,000 liters of fuel becoming a funeral pyre that would burn for 6 hours, warping the rails and shattering the concrete ties. A vital supply artery was severed. Back in the command post, 4 pilots ripped off their headsets, their faces pale, drenched in sweat. A moment of stunned silence, then the room erupted in cheers. 4 drones, costing a total of $12,000, had incinerated over $3 million in fuel and crippled a critical piece of infrastructure.
But the real victory was the message they sent. It echoed from the burning train all the way back to the highest enemy commands. The age of impunity was over. There were no more safe rear areas. If a $3,000 drone could reach 35 kilometers, tomorrow it could be 50. And next week, 100. Every bridge, every ammo dump, every command post was now vulnerable, and Ukraine had thousands more drones waiting for their turn to fly.